Okay, so here we're going to start building our geometries for our plants that we're going to be instancing across our branch. I've come up with a couple of concepts here, just some quick sketches. We've got 5 plants overall, with a bit of variety in both sort of size and shape. Because we're going to be scattering a lot of these all over our branch, I think this will give some nice variety in this overall look. So we've got this first one here, it's just like a stem with a little flower bulb on the end. We've got this guy, which is like a stem. I sort of see this unrolling a bit like a fire hose, and then all these spiky sort of spines that will sort of unroll out of it as it unfolds. This one's kind of like just a traditional grass with these sort of little hairs on the end. This one is kind of like a fungus or almost like a clamshell. So it's kind of this sort of disc that will open up. We've got some nice detail on the inside, I think, which will look quite interesting. And the last one here is just like a little stem that will unroll or something like that. And it'll have all these little seeds on it that will sort of be arranged in a nice sort of order around our spline. So making these is going to give us a variety of different techniques which we can explore. I think it's going to be pretty fun. So let's just start with number A here, which is nice and simple, just our stem and our flower bulb. We're going to jump up a level to our main object context. We're actually going to build these plants each in their own geometry container, and then we can import this into our setup and instance them on our points. So I'm going to create a new geometry container here. Let's call this one plant A, and we will tap C just to color this kind of teal color here. I'm going to dive inside, and I've got this enabled up here to be hide other objects, so we're only seeing what's inside our container here. So overall, we're going to be building these models to be aligned along the positive Z direction, so along here. And by doing that, it's going to mean that when we import them onto our points for instancing, they will sort of line up along our curve normal, which is what we want. So we're either going to model along our positive Z, or we're going to model them and then rotate them so that they're facing along our positive Z. The other thing as well is we're going to model all of these to sort of roughly fit into about 1 unit of Houdini space, so about 1 meter. And if we sort of standardize these all to be the same length, it'll make it nice and easy at the end when we've got them all in our scene to kind of just adjust the sizes by adjusting our p-scale. But we'll get to that later. For now, let's just start making our model here. So I'm going to drop down a line SOP. I'm going to set its direction to be 1 in the z-axis. I'm going to give it maybe 5 points along here, and I'm going to tap S to select and just make sure I'm in point selection mode here. I'm going to select our middle point, just tap T to transform it, and let's just move it up a little bit like this. Just want to give it a little bit of a bend in our stem here. Might also just come, tap S again, select these other 2 points in the middle here, tap T and just move them up slightly as well. Next, we're going to smooth this out just by putting down a Resample SOP. So I'm going to type tab, Resample. I'm going to tap Shift and Enter to drop this down straight after I edit. I'm going to set this to be subdivision curves to smooth this out nicely. And I'm probably going to turn off this one. I'm going to set this just to be a fixed number of points, about 15, I think will do it. So the idea for this is we are going to have this sort of grow on, and we can use a carve to do this. We can use this to essentially just like draw on our spline from the origin all the way to our end. If I put down a carve SOP, the moment this one just does the opposite direction, we're going to turn that off, turn on second U, and now we can go from our origin to the end of our spline like that. To actually make the stem, we're just going to put down a sweep SOP. I'm going to drag our curve into the first input, And then if we come up here, I'm going to change the surface shape to be a round tube. I'm going to keep the columns at 8, maybe just bring our radius down a bit. Sort of about, let's go for 0.03, I think, something like that. I'm going to come down as well and just apply scale along our curve. I'm going to bring down our end here. This is going to allow us to taper the end from the base to the tip. So if I click here, add another point maybe, I'm going to click this point, shift click the last to select all of them. And if we right click, we can choose maybe Bezier to smooth this out a bit more. I think something like that will be perfect for this. So there's our sweep. Let's go and create our flower bulb next. So over here, I'm going to put down a curve SOP. Select that. In fact, I'll stay on this. I'm just going to press space 4 to come into our right hand side. So we're looking down the edge of this now. Now if we come to our curve, it's going to draw out the shape of our flower bulb in profile, and we're going to revolve this into a full sort of lathed shape. So making sure I've got the handle tool active, I'm going to just drop down a few points here, something like that, I think. Tap enter, and then I'm just going to click on each individual point and just reshape this just a little bit, perhaps something kind of like this. A little bit wider down here, tapering off a bit towards the end. Let's smooth this as well, again with the resample. I'm going to set this to be subdivision curves, and again I'm just going to use a constant count of about 10 here. So now we've got this, I'm going to go back, I'm just going to tweak this shape just a little bit more, just to kind of adjust it to my liking. Feel free to do whichever you like, but I think this sort of shape is what I'm looking for. Okay, so next we can revolve this. I'm just going to come back and tap spacebar 1 to go back to our main view. Just make sure actually tap spacebar 2 just to check this is straight along our x-axis. If you had moved it at all, let's say we just had one of our points out of alignment, say this one. This wouldn't work so well when it came to our revolve, so we could always just line this up. Just put down point wrangle and type attribute p.x equals 0. And that will just flatten out all our points to lie along that axis. So just in case you have not got it quite flat, we can use that. So let's revolve this now into our full shape. So we can put down a revolve SOP. This is going to create our flower bulb here. I'm going to reverse our cross sections just because we want our normals to face the right way. And next I'm going to I want to kind of disturb or mess around with our shape just a little bit so it's not quite perfect. We can put down a mountain here just to adjust things a little bit. So that's way too much. Let's bring down our height probably to about 0.1. Let's change our element size to be about 0.2 perhaps. And I'm going to come down to our noise settings and roughness and just bring the roughness down to 0 so it's a little bit smoother. You can mess with our offset as well a bit, but all I want to do is just kind of give a bit more sort of organic shape to our bulb here. Let's next make this a bit thicker. I'm going to smooth this out in the end and I want to give it a bit of sort of thickness, so I'm going to put down a poly extrude just to sort of extrude out our faces here. Type poly extrude. Drop this one after. I'm just going to pull this up a bit, somewhere around here, let's say about 0.15. And just want to make sure we've got our back faces enabled. If you look inside, you can see this is just, oops, a single edge. So if I enable output back, now it's a thick, solid surface. So finally for this bit, let's just put down a subdivide. We can smooth this out, give it a little bit more geometry. I'll leave the settings at default, depth of 1. And just to give a bit more thickness around sort of the edge here, I'm going to go back to our poly extrude and just create an extra division here. So with divisions, I'm going to set that to 2. I'm just going to add an extra like poly loop around there just to thicken things up a bit more. So this is our sort of flower bulb shape. We've got our stem here. Next, we want to sort of line this up so it sits along the end of our stem. But we also want this to move as we animate our carve. So obviously at the moment, this is what the animation is going to kind of do. We want this to stick to the end. The easiest way to do this, I think, is just to use a copy to points, and we will grab our curve here. We'll take the end point and we'll just copy our model here onto our end point. So let's first just grab that end point here. I'm just going to come and change our point display here. If I press D to do our display options, come down to our point marker size. I'm just going to set that to be 5. Should make it a little bit easier to see now, hopefully, on the screen. So next, put down a group by range. This one's quite useful just for selecting the start or the ends of a curve. If we set the group type to be points, we can set our start or end selection. And if we set the end to be 1, it's going to deselect our last one. Let's just invert that range, and now we've got our end point selected. So with that one, let's just name this to be end. And we can put down a copy to points below that. We'll drag our bulb model into the first input, and we'll drag our curve into the second. Just highlight that, turn off our points, and make sure our target points is set here to be end. So that kind of worked, except we haven't bothered to take into account any sort of alignment of our curve. So 2 things we're missing. First of all, we want to make sure that this is rotated to be facing along our z-axis. So we can just put down a transform here. I'm just going to hold Control and just click and drag along here to constrain this to 45-degree angles. And we can line this up just like that. So this is now facing along Z. So it's pretty good, but still, if we were to animate this carve, you can see it's not actually following the tangent of our curve, it's just moving in place. And the reason for that is we forgot to add any kind of normal and up vectors to our spline here. So we can do that just by using our Orient along curve SOP. This is just going to generate our normals and up vectors for us. If I click on that, I'm going to come to our normals, and you can see our normal is now nicely following the tangent of our curve. If I were to Control click, and it's just off the screen here, if I click on the up and then just make sure we've got that enabled in the visualizers, which we do, I'm just going to change this target up vector from curve normal, which can be a little bit unpredictable, I found, for what I'm doing at the moment. I'm just going to change this to be the x-axis. So these up vector is just going to point straight along this x-axis perpendicularly. So with those 2 enabled, now when we select our copy to points, turn off our display here, you can see this nicely follows along our curve. The only trouble is though, you'll notice it's a little bit jittery. And the reason for that is because we are carving our spline and then generating our normals. So again, if you see here, as we carve, our end point is kind of being created and then our normals are being generated, but it's kind of causing this problem with this stepping. So what we can do is we can just reverse the order here. If we take our Orient along curve and put it above the carve, it's going to create that normal first, and then as we carve it, we actually get a nice smooth interpolation along that. So with that done, turn that one off, we have now got a nice smooth rotation along this. And we do need to be careful. If we go all the way to 0, we delete all our points and the bulb disappears. So we need to either set up some kind of sort of stopper there, or we just need to make sure we never animate down to 0. So there's our sweep, there's our bulb. Let's just connect these together. I'm going to select both of those. I'm going to tap Alt and just drag out our little nodes here to merge them. Let's put down a null. And we will just call this plant A underscore out and connect that one up. And then in the next lesson, we're now going to look at just animating this one quickly.